I'm Abby and welcome to my channel. If you are new here, please hit that like button and that subscribe button. Today, I'm just gonna be sitting here and talking with you and sharing with you my journey of how I have gotten to this point to where I am a full-time surf and travel influencer. I've built my platforms and my channels over 100,000 followers, and I am now living here in Bali, getting to surf and live out my dream every single day. And it's not something that happened overnight, and nor does it ever, but people are always asking, how did you get here? How did I go from being $30,000 in student loan debt to now surfing every day, following my passion, making money off of it? So I wanted to share, because out of all of my DMs and messages that I get, it's like, how did you do this? How do you make money? I want to share my journey with you from pretty much when I graduated university up until where I am now, which is the past 8 years of my life. After I graduated university, I was 22 years old. I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. The only really thing I wanted to do was travel. Travel had been my biggest passion I've ever had. And I always was like, okay, well, I'm gonna study something so that I could travel and do something so I could travel. It was always about traveling. Originally, when I had lived in Chile, I had met a bunch of people who did working holiday visas in Australia. And I was like, oh, that's so cool. I would love to do that. But since I'm from the US, I probably can't do that. But I actually did a little bit of research and I found out that if you are from the US, we can as well get a working holiday visa. So you can apply online. It's around 400 Australian dollars. And if your age is 18 to 30, you can apply to get a 1-year working visa in Australia. And I was like, cool, that sounds amazing. So after I graduated, I did apply for some jobs, but I actually didn't get any. But my whole mind, I kept telling people and wanting to move to Australia. I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna do it, because when am I ever gonna get a chance to go to the other side of the world to actually live this experience, to do it? Even though my mom and my family and everyone and friends had different plans and ideas, I was like, you know what, I'm gonna stick with my gut. And so I worked after I graduated. I spent the whole entire summer. I worked 4 different jobs. I was a waitress, I was bartending, I worked at a golf course. I was doing photography, I was doing marketing. I was doing so many different things to make money. I pretty much worked like every single day, working multiple jobs, trying to save up to go to Australia. I only had it saved up $3,000, but I was like, you know what, that's enough to get me there to find a job. I kind of just went on a whim. I flew to Sydney, I got there. Within a week, I kind of like just partied and had a lot of fun. And then I was able to find a job at a finance company. So I actually worked the reception at a company there. And working the reception, it gave me a salary, and I worked there for 6 months. And I also had another part-time job that I was doing in the US. So I was able to do my part-time job in the US because it was flexible hours. It was just project-based while I was managing the reception of this finance company, and it was a salary. So I was like, okay, I can save up all this money that I'm earning in Australia, and then I will use that to travel Southeast Asia. That was my plan originally, but you know, as life goes on, plans changed. I worked for 6 months. My 6-month contract ended. My little sister, she was actually living and teaching in Thailand at the time, and I had dropped her off on the way to Australia. So I wanted to go back and visit her after she had been living there for 7 months. So I flew back to Thailand. After my 7 months, I was in Sydney, and we traveled through Thailand and through Malaysia with all the money that I'd saved. Meanwhile there, I had a friend from Canada who her sister was competing in the Junior Olympics in China, and they were like, hey, if you get to China, if you pay for your flight to China, we'll cover the rest. And I was like, oh my God, I'm gonna go to China. But I also had a friend in Australia who invited me to New Zealand to go live in a van. So I flew back to Australia, I went to New Zealand, I lived in a van for a month with this girl that I had met, got back, got my visa, went to China, and I was running out of money. And I was like, okay, well, I'm gonna go finish off my time in Australia with my visa. But I wanted to switch it up. I didn't want to stay in Sydney the whole time. I wanted a little bit more of like an Australian experience. So I ended up going to the Gold Coast, which was I ended up living in Burleigh, which I absolutely loved. One of my dreams always was to live somewhere that I could walk to the surf, I could walk to work, and I could walk home, like having like a walkable life. And I did that for about 2 months, but then I decided that I wanted to like expand a little bit more and not just stay in this tiny little bubble. And I got another job bartending. By the way, I have never bartended a day in my life, so fake it till you make it. I have worked in the restaurant industry quite a bit. And I was like, my whole thing that I said, I remember was like, oh, I have a lot of beer and wine knowledge, but I don't have the best cocktail experience. However, I've learned a lot is if you have the right personality, the right charisma to bring to something, people are willing to teach you. So I got a job working at the Star in Broad Beach, if you know it. And I worked there for 6 months and I absolutely loved it. I had the time of my life. I ended up staying longer in Australia because I loved it so much, 10 months there. It's where I really started surfing and everything. But as all good things do come to the end, my 2 years in Australia was up and I was like, okay, I guess it's time to go home. This was the time. I originally said I was gonna go for 9 months and then I extended 2 years. And then I was like, okay, well, we're gonna go back and finish Southeast Asia. So I flew to Cambodia, did a month in Cambodia, I did a month in Vietnam, and then I ended up flying to Bali actually, because I miss surfing so much. And then I remember being in Vietnam. This was like the moment for me. I was actually doing the Ha Giang Loop, if you're familiar with that. And it's like this amazing motorbike loop that you have to do at least once in your life. And I remember going and I was like on a high. I was like, this is amazing. I'm making amazing friends. I'm so happy. I've never been so happy. And I'm like, I'm 24 years old. I'm still in so much debt. I didn't pay off any of my debt. I was like, I'm gonna worry about that later. I just wanna like live in the moment and have fun because I'm here. And I kept having this deadline of I have to go back to school. Or not go back to school, I have to go find a job, or I have to settle down, or I have to do this whole corporate thing or whatever. And I remember asking myself, why? Why? I'm happy now. I'm happy here. And I thought, well, what if I didn't stop? What if I just figured out another way to do this or continue doing this? Because out of my whole entire life that I've ever lived, I was never really happy unless I was traveling. That's where I felt the most alive, the most amazing. And so I kept asking myself why. And I remember being like, why am I going back to a life that I never felt like was for me and wasn't? So I was like, okay, what are we gonna do next? What is the next step? And while I was in Australia, a girl I was bartending with, she had told me about the yachting industry. So then I found out about the yachting industry. At first, I wasn't too keen on it. I was like, I don't really like boats. I kind of get seasick. However, my friend, she had just moved to the Med and she was like, oh my God, I'm making so much money. This is amazing. It's so much fun. And I was so broke at the time. I was paying $5 for a hostel. I was eating street food. I was doing everything to make my money stretch as far as possible. I was broke, but I was still traveling and I was still in debt. And after doing that for a couple years, I was like, you know what? I actually kind of want to have more money. I don't want to just be doing the cheapest things and constantly struggling and always being stressed out about money. So I thought, you know what? Maybe I'll do this yachting thing for a little bit. And so I looked into it, which anyone can pretty much go into the yachting industry, no matter what country you're from. Anybody is welcome, which is a really cool concept of it. I looked into it. I ended up getting I had to get some certifications like the SCCW, and you also have to get like an ENG, which is like a medical evaluation. So as I returned back to the US, I was able to, there's about mainly 3 yacht hubs that a lot of people go to when they're trying to get a job. It's Palma and Mallorca, you have Antibes in the south of France, and then you also have South Florida. Since I am from the US and it's illegal for me to look for work there, it just made the most sense for me to go to South Florida to get my courses and everything. So after I came back from Australia, I still didn't have a lot of money. I was really kind of broke then. I had barely enough money to pay for my courses because it was around 1,000 USD. I paid for that. And then I moved to a crew house in Fort Lauderdale. And I remember being so nervous about it. I was freaking out. And I was like, why is it so hard for me to have to go move somewhere in the US, which a country I'm from, and go find a job versus literally I flew to the other side of the world of Australia. I knew absolutely nobody and I made it work. But then I just was like, changed my whole mindset. I was like, you know what, we're gonna give it a try. Worst case scenario, this doesn't work out. I did a lot of research about it. I was super nervous. I knew nothing. But I remember one thing that I looked up and I remember watching a video about, and someone said, the yachting industry is an industry that doesn't really exist. There's no skills that can prepare you for this, even if you have worked in hospitality or on a boat. However, it's a type of industry that nothing can be prepared for. And you pretty much get hired entry level based off your personality. And I was like, score. I was like, I know I have a great personality. I'm very sociable. A lot of people can generally like me. I can read a room well. I can hold a great conversation. I was like, I'll be fine. And plus, like, to be honest, like, it is a bit of a, in the best way possible, how do I say it? If you're a good looking person, you're most likely gonna find a job there. It's very superficial. So I was like, okay, I can do this. So I moved to South Florida. I ended up I was cold call selling myself. I was dock walking. Every time I would go out to bars and stuff, I would have made business cards with my name and my phone number, and I was applying for a position on deck. I would hand them out like crazy. I was just networking because I was like, all right, it's more about who you know than what you know, especially in the beginning phases. And eventually through doing that, I met a lot of people, I got a lot of day work, and I got my first job on a yacht. I ended up working on that boat for like 4 or 5 months. We sailed to Costa Rica and the pandemic hit. I was also dating a guy from New Zealand at the time, and he was like, hey, how about we go to New Zealand? And he was like, his family actually had owned a farm, and he's like, we can give you like a job and whatever. And I wasn't really happy in the position, and the people that I was working with, it wasn't the best environment. So I was super keen for a new adventure, and I was like, sweet, New Zealand, why not? So mid-pandemic, crazy story, I barely even got in because like the borders had shut down. I remember this moment, like everything was closing down. It was right on my birthday in Costa Rica. Everything shut down. We like left the country quickly, and I thought, oh, I'll just stop over and see my family in the US really quickly. And I remember I arrived, my sister picked me up at the airport. My ex-boyfriend calls me and he says, are you sitting down? And I was like, yeah. He's like, I have bad news. They're closing the borders to New Zealand at midnight. And I was like, oh my God, what? Like, what am I supposed to do? And they were like looking up everything, the regulations, because things were changing so fast during COVID times. And we found his family had contacted like an agency and all this stuff. And we found like legally there was one like line that said that you could enter New Zealand if you're with a partner or a spouse. And we're like, well, we're partners. Does that work? And so somehow on a whim, I ended up like getting a flight. I had to get on a flight like within 6 hours, go back to go meet my ex in San Francisco to get on the same flight with him, which like wasn't even allowed on the first flight. We had to have the New Zealand government call the United Airlines to be like, she can come on the flight and go to New Zealand. And I learned actually during this time that if you get sent to a country, it's not your fault, it's the airline's fault, and they get fined something like $50,000 if they send somebody there without a proper visa. But I had to get my bag handwritten and my bag tags handwritten, and I had to get escorted onto the plane to get into New Zealand because this was during the pandemic and everything was closing and the borders were closed. I get to New Zealand and it wasn't that crazy for the first week, and then all of a sudden everything shut down because we were self-quarantining, and I spent pretty much 4 or 5 months in New Zealand during the pandemic in lockdown. And it was a bit of a tough time. I think it's a tough time for everybody, but luckily I still had a job. I was living with my ex-boyfriend's parents and I was picking kiwi fruit. So it was actually the time that the kiwi fruit was ready to be harvested. So I ended up working on his family's farm. And I stayed in New Zealand about 6 months, and the winter was starting to come. But I was seeing, people online in the summer, and especially being from the US, everything was opening up and New Zealand just kept shutting down, kept going back into another lockdown. And I was like, you know what, I think I'm going to leave. And so I decided to book a flight back to the States and try to find another yachting job. I flew back to the States, had to live with my mom again, and I found a job in the Caribbean on another yacht. I flew to that yacht in the Caribbean, and that was honestly the boat that changed like everything for me. That boat was the craziest boat ever. I could go into a whole entire other drama and saga about this boat and the drama that went down. If you've ever seen this show Below Deck, though, that boat is way worse than that show. It was actually insane, the things that happened on that boat. However, that boat chartered a lot. That boat, since we were based in St. Thomas, which is the US Virgin Islands, during the pandemic, you could actually, since it was a US territory, anyone who was from the US could fly there since it wasn't leaving the country, and they could charter. And honestly, chartering a yacht during the pandemic was the safest thing to do if you had the money, because we're all quarantined, we're getting tested constantly. So, what's safer than being on a yacht in the Caribbean during the pandemic? And we couldn't do anything anyway, so we were just getting tips. So on top of my salary, which my salary at the time was around $3,000, sometimes we were making anywhere from $2,000 to $5,000 a week cash or in tips. So pretty much during that time, I made quite a bit of money. And I was like, you know what? I want to use this time to pay off my debt and really set myself up, which was very difficult to do. However, I realized that the yachting industry wasn't for me because there were so many other issues. And I can go into another top video about this in another time. But I was like, I can't continue to do this. So I really need to set myself up for success. So I paid off all of my loans within that short amount of time because of the yachting industry. And I actually got fired from that boat and I got another job within another week on another boat. And I ended up staying on that boat for a whole nother year. That was a private yacht. It didn't make any charter tips, but it did provide me a consistent income. So I was working on that boat for a bit. It was still pretty much 2021 time, so nothing was too crazy, lots of COVID restrictions. But I used that time wisely, not in the beginning. At first, I was really going through a lot of things mentally, and I was not, how would I say, I was not in the best place mentally at that time. But eventually I did go into therapy and I turned my life around and I said, you know what, I'm done with this. I'm no longer going to be a victim, take accountability for my actions. And I was like, I want to have a business. I want to be able to travel on my own. Being in the yachting industry inspired me to start my own business because I saw people, like I saw the wealthiest people in the world. They had the most freedom to do whatever they wanted, whenever they wanted. Even during a global pandemic, it didn't matter. And I said, I want that freedom as well. So it inspired me to start a business. And I was trying to figure out how on earth could I start a business while I'm working all the time? Because in the yachting industry, you are a slave. They pretty much compare the yachting industry to prison. Like you get told what to wear, where to sleep, when to eat. Like you have no control over anything. Even when you think you have time off, you don't have time off. And so it was very difficult to do or build anything and at all. However, I can't remember exactly how I found it, but I found this course talking about digital publishing. And I was like, and a lot of what I did, let me back up, during my yachting times is when I realized it needed a change. I was like, well, how can I change? And a lot of times we think, oh, we need to change, we need to find something while we're in that. But a lot of times it takes you leaving a situation in order to have space for something new to open up. But I was like, okay, well, how can I deal with that? What do I do? And a lot of the work that I did on the yacht was cleaning and maintaining and doing stuff like that. So I could listen to a lot of music or put my AirPods in. So I went through so many audiobooks on self-help, on business, podcasts, you name it. I was indulging in it. I had spent so much money on audiobooks. I was like, I need to change my life. This is not what I want to do. I need to figure this out. And so I was just consuming knowledge. I didn't really even listen to music. I full on was like, all right, the people that are around me right now are not for me. They don't support me. So I need to put myself in an environment around something that is supportive and feed my brain. And so I just full on just put audios in for 10 hours every single day. And I was obsessed with it. So I was like, I have to change my life. I'm going to start a business. And along the way, I found this course to publish digital products. This course on learning how to publish books onto Amazon and using like the KDP. And I was like, okay, this sounds great. Like, it's not something I need to meet with people. I can just do this when I have my free time, like whenever we have internet, like no problem. So I took this course. I invested a lot of money. I actually hired a mentor. I was full in, I was full focused. And I remember one thing that they told me was do something for your business every single day. And I was stuck to that because I was like, this is my ticket out. And I was making some money. Like I wasn't making a ton. I was definitely making some money. However, after a year on this boat I was on, it was time for me to go on my annual leave. And I decided to go to Nicaragua. For some reason, Nicaragua had been like, you know, when a country gets placed on your heart and you're like, I want to go to this country, you don't really know why. But I was like, okay, I'm going to go to Nicaragua. I got into yoga at that time and I booked a yoga retreat. And actually, Nicaragua is another country that I think really changed the trajectory of my life because I went there looking for yoga. And I picked up surfing again. And I hadn't surfed in a couple of years. And I was like, wow, I love surfing. I don't want to ever leave the ocean. I ended up canceling all of my other plans to go like trekking and do anything else in Nicaragua because I was like, I cannot leave the ocean. I'm obsessed. I want to surf. Like I literally went for one day and I was like, I just want to surf. Like I was like, I don't want to do this. And I remember even saying when I was in Nicaragua, I was like, I hope I get fired because if you get fired, depending on the boat and the contract, but the current boat I was working on, if I got fired, I would get a whole month payout and they'd have to fly me somewhere. So I was like, wow, I could get a whole month payout. But I also was very nervous to leave a situation. And I would compare the situation I was in the yachting industry as a very abusive relationship because it's something that is really difficult to leave. And it's very hard to leave because it was my financial support. It was my home. It was my community. It was everything. And it was like, I was almost 27 at the time. And I had never actually had like a real type of job. And it was really hard to be like, you know, to start over. Starting over sucks in general. But I was like, you know, I couldn't take the courage myself. I ended up coming back from Nicaragua and I got fired. But you know what? I was like, this is it. I'm done. I'm done with the yachting industry. Like, this is not for me, and this is my sign. I couldn't do it. The universe let it happen. And I was like, cool, I have like a whole month payout. And I thought about going back to Nicaragua at that time and just going and living there. But I was like, no, I'm going to go work on this business. So I moved back to Alabama, where my mom and my grandma live, and which I'm not from. I'm originally from Colorado, but due to my family's parents' divorce and the split and a lot of different things, my mom had moved back there, and my relationship with my mother is way better, so I prefer to go stay there. So I go and I end up living with my grandma for about 3 months in southern Alabama. I'm talking, this is a town that you would see in Legally Blonde type thing. It is very southern type, sorry, not Legally Blonde. It's a small southern town where everyone is like you could imagine it could be like in the movies. It's quite a culture shock, even for me being someone who's from the US. I go and live there, but I was like, you know what, I don't care. I'm just gonna grind and I'm gonna focus. After about 3 months of doing it, I was doing fine. I was kind of going into routine. I just went to the gym. I just hung out with my grandma for 3 months, and I tried to grow this publishing business. And I was obsessed with it, but I ended up realizing that I was getting super lonely, and I didn't have any social interactions or anything like that, and I wasn't quite getting to my business goals. I had a friend that I met in Australia who's from Canada, and she always said to me, hey, like, you can always come and stay with me as long as you want. I was super lonely, and I remember I texted her and I said, hey, remember how you told me I could come stay with you as long as I want? Like, can I take you up on that offer? And she said, yeah. And I said, can I call you? And I told her my situation, and she's like, yeah, you can come. Like, and I was like, can I really stay as long as I want? And she's like, yeah. So I booked a one-way flight to Toronto, and I just moved there. I had some other friends that I had met there, and I ended up living with my friend in Toronto for 3 months. Thank you. Like, honestly, I don't know what I would have done without the friends that have helped me and supported me along the way. So she allowed me to live with her and provided me a home while I could still continue working on this publishing business, but I could also still have social interactions and everything. And during that time, actually, I remember I had a bunch of different, I was a bit off the dating scene, of course. Like, I was very focused on business. I had been really hurt in a lot of past relationships. So I was kind of like at this point where I was like, okay, maybe I'm going to get myself out there a little bit more. So I started dating, and I went on some dating apps. And I remember I went on this date with this guy who was very successful, and it made me feel really insecure because I was like not successful. I was like, I'm 27 years old. I was living with my grandma. Now I'm living with my friend. I'm trying to start this business. I'm losing money. What am I doing? And I see this guy who's just had turned 29. He was like, and I didn't feel good about myself. And I remember I called my younger brother because him and we always talk business together. And by the end of the phone conversation, I called him because I felt insecure. And he was telling me a business problem he had. And I remember being like, hey, can I help you with this business thing? And by the end of the phone conversation, I ended up getting a job to work with my brother. And originally the plan with working with my younger brother is he knew I was working on this publishing business. I said, hey, like, I would love to work for you part-time while I still build my publishing business, but I do need a little bit of income. So it was originally, I'm going to work with him until my publishing business is good enough on my own, and just like a bit of a side gig. The job that I got working with my younger brother, mind you, I am now 30. My brother is 7 years younger than me. So he was 21 at the time, but he had started a business on TikTok. He was a TikTok growth coach. So if you're ever scrolling on TikTok and you see somebody who's giving you tips on growth, that was my brother. And the job that he needed help with was an account setter. So what I did was I was on his TikTok, and I would answer his DMs, and I would also reach out to people. I would scout people that were following him or engaging in his content who we saw as potential people who needed help growing their platform. And I would do I would pretty much reach out, or if they reached out, and I would pretty much do a script sale thing, but of course, like, it's different texting. And I would try to get them to book a call with him. And I made commission per sale that he did. And he paid me quite well. So that was a lot of fun. I ended up making quite a bit of money with my younger brother. And I was like, okay, this is amazing. Like, I have a remote income and whatever. And I had a friend from Argentina that I had met when I was 15. She was an exchange student at my high school, and I'd already been to Argentina, but she was getting married that year. So I really wanted to go, and it was my goal to figure out something so I can get to Argentina. And now that I had this income with my younger brother, I was like, all right, I'm going to Argentina, let's go. And this is when my digital nomad journey started, was in Argentina. It was chaotic. I literally got robbed the second I got off the plane. My phone was gone, which, like, mind you, I make all money through TikTok at this time through my brother's account. So like it sent me into a full-on spiral. Luckily, another girl that was coming from the wedding had another friend who was from Colorado who was able to pick me up an iPhone, but I had to literally fly to Patagonia, south of Patagonia in September, October to get my iPhone. And I had like bikinis because I was planning on going to the tropics after this and to go start my surf life. So I'm in Patagonia in the snow with a bag full of bikinis to get my iPhone. And I'm like, well, since I'm here, we might as well go trekking. So luckily I rented a bunch of stuff and like went trekking and had my iPhone, and things calmed down. And I traveled through Peru, and then I ended up going to Costa Rica, and it was a bit of a mess, my digital nomad journey at first. Like I thought that I could travel like how I traveled when I backpacked, but having a job on top of traveling is very difficult because, you know, you need reliable internet, you need space to do it, you need a bit of routine, you can't be as spontaneous. And I learned that a bit along the way. So I'm working for my brother. I'm doing a bunch of different, I'm doing account setting and stuff. I had been doing this for a few months, and I was helping people grow. Like I remember there was one girl, she worked at a call center and she wanted to be a fitness influencer. And I remember finding her, and I remember my brother was like, oh no, I don't think she's gonna be able to do it or this. And I was like, no, trust me, like I think I see potential in this girl. This girl had brought the course with my brother. We helped her gain like 120,000 followers within 6 weeks. Crazy. And there was another girl who's a therapist who was able to take her whole entire platform online. I saw there's a lot of people that I was scouting in my brother, in the work that I did with my brother, and I saw it changing their lives like before my hands. And I was helping people change their lives all because of social media, because of TikTok. And I was like, wow, like this is insane. And I was like, I live such a unique life. I have been traveling now for years. I've been doing this. I am traveling full time now. Why am I not posting about my life? But I had big imposter syndrome. It took me a solid month of when I first realized I wanted to do social media to ask my brother to go into his coaching program to get help to do social media. It was so hard for me to do it. And my brother, he's also a stickler. So I was like, all right, I have to come up with a good way of negotiating to get this for him to give it to me because his coaching program was very expensive. I was like, all right, so I thought about this. My brother's a very good salesman, a very good negotiator. So I was like, okay, I'm going to put this in a way of a favor of how me learning and doing my own social media will only help his business because now I understand it and I can help more people. And throughout doing that, he eventually did say yes. And I went through my brother's coaching program to help me grow a platform on TikTok. I got 10,000 followers within 6 weeks. Kind of crazy. I ended up getting 40,000 followers within 6 months because of the strategy that I followed with my brother. And I was still continuously working for my brother. I was also still doing my publishing business and posting on social media. It was very overwhelming doing 3 things at once. And I remember speaking to my therapist about it and being like, I don't want to give up this publishing business, though it's like not quite making money. What do I do? And like anytime, if you ever start a business or doing anything, it's like there's a fine line of knowing when to quit and knowing when to push through, because in the journey of anything entrepreneurial or hardship, there's going to be times that you want to give up, that you want to quit, that you are just like, I can't do this. I'm not meant for this. And I think the biggest question that you have to ask, which my therapist asked me, and if you're going through something similar, is your heart in it? Because if your heart is in it, don't ever give up. Never give up. But if your heart's not in it and you're just doing it for something else or for another reason or for money, then, you know, there's other avenues to get yourself there. And I realized through social media that I wanted to live this lifestyle of being free, being able to work wherever I wanted. And that's why I started this publishing business. However, I realized that doesn't have to be the only way that I can go. And I saw social media and I was like, that's me. I'm going to do that. I know I can do that. Like I saw it and I was like, that's me. Like, this is my path. And it took a bit for me to say that. I had to shut down the publishing business. I was employing editors, graphic designers. I had a writer. I had to let them all go, which was really difficult. And I had to shut it down. But my energy was spread too much, doing too many different things. And I decided to just go full in on social media. I was just working with my brother and also publishing. I also got my first UGC deal from TikTok. And I was like, cool, I'm making money doing this. And then things had gotten a little bit rocky with my brother's business, and things had changed as he had gone through his own challenges himself. And I ended up going into the role later on of being an account manager. Pretty much what I did was I reviewed all the other clients' content, gave them a pre-approval before they posted it online. I also did a bunch of, I made content plans for them. So I pretty much was doing all of that while managing my accounts. I did that for probably almost a year. And about a year into doing it, it was quite making it. I had started doing other contracting work. I was still publishing and making some money on my own pages. And May of last year was when everything kind of switched for me and completely changed. I went to El Salvador and I woke up one day. It was like May 1st, and I decided I didn't want to work with my brother anymore. I wanted to pursue my dreams, because there was, of course, some challenges that was going on within his business, but it wasn't providing the financial support that I needed, but it was taking all of my time. And I was like, you know what, why don't we just go full in on myself? I've never given myself a chance, besides when I had lived with my grandma doing my publishing business, to really go full in on social media. And I was like, this is what I want to do. This is what I'm going to do. And I was like, what if I just have the time to just make content, where content is my main focus, where I just, and I was like, I have enough savings to do it. So I remember having a phone conversation with my brother, which felt like a full-on breakup. We cried, and everything is great on that end of the relationship, but I had to make that tough decision again to bet on me, take a chance on myself and on my dreams. And I was like, if it doesn't work out, I can always just find another job, or I can always do something else. Like, something will always happen. Everything is figure-outable. The way that my life has gone, I know that this is just a pivot, a change, a bump in my journey. But I knew in my gut that I had to do this. And I was a bit financially stressed, and I've been financially stressed so many times in my life, reoccurringly. And I got an email from World Packers, and World Packers is an organization where you can volunteer in exchange for accommodation and food. So if you were actually looking into wanting to volunteer, which is how I started traveling when I was a lot younger and didn't have a lot of money, was doing a bit of work exchange, you can do that. I ended up getting an email. They said that they would give me a compensation to go on a World Packer experience, to give me a membership. And I applied for one in Japan. I got accepted. I was going to go be teaching surfing and skating in Japan. A week before I was supposed to go, I get an email saying that they're no longer working with that organization, and my thing has been canceled. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm 29 years old. I just kind of stopped working with my brother. I'm making a little bit of money, but to me, this was like, okay, I don't have to pay for accommodation or food, so it's going to be fine. And then it's not. But I was like, you know what, I'm going to calm down. I've been through so many different situations in my life where I've had to pivot. And I was like, what do I really want to do? And I was like, I really actually just want to go to the Philippines. And so I ended up booking a flight from Japan to the Philippines, and I moved to Siargao. And Siargao honestly really changed everything for me. I had just hit 10,000 followers before I went. I had just started posting surf content, which surf content was really what changed my account, and what really changed my life was me posting my passions. And my passion is surfing. And I saw a lot online of just perfect surfers and people who were surfing well. And I was like, that's not the reality. Like, the reality of surfing is falling, it's eating shit. It's like getting back up and going over and over again. Like, you're not often on a wave. Like, most of it is sitting and paddling, and the frustrations of learning a sport later in life, especially something that is so difficult like surfing. And so me just posting about my journey as a surfer blew up my account. And in Siargao, I kept posting and posting, and there was times that my account just blew up even more in Siargao. And then I went to Sri Lanka because during my crisis, when I had messaged the place in Tokyo, I was looking for other World Packer experiences. And there was this ice bath place in Sri Lanka called Isoligama. And I was in contact with the owner for a bit, and he saw my social media, and he was like, hey, we don't need actual volunteers, but if you want to come help us with social media. So I ended up going to Sri Lanka. They had provided my housing and my scooter, and I got to use the sauna and ice bath and yoga in exchange for helping them with content. So I ended up doing that for 3 months, which was a great help because I was just making other income from just doing content and things like that. I ended up going back to Panama for a little bit to celebrate my 30th birthday with my close friends. Highly recommend doing something like that. Getting your friends together for your birthday, amazing, so much fun. And then I ended up deciding to come back to Indonesia because for for many reasons, I make the same amount of money anywhere that I go, and the quality and the things that you want and you get out of life, you just get more value for it. So I decided to come back to Indonesia. And now here I am living in Bali, making content, and I'm grateful beyond means. And I just want to share with you my journey of how graduating with $30,000 of student loan debt, having no idea what I wanted to do, but just booking a one-way flight to Australia, and now here living in Bali and getting to surf every day and make content about it and meeting like-minded people has been a journey of failing and repeating and pivoting and doing all that. And I share this because I want to share with you that you too can change your life. You too can create your own reality but it just takes time, and it just takes persistence, and also takes training your mind. I've spent 4 or 5 years in therapy. I've hired multiple coaches and mentors to get myself to where I am. I've invested a lot of time in myself, in audiobooks and podcasts, and watching people and listening to people and consuming the right things. So yes, you can have a certain life, and I firmly believe that you can have whatever you want. However, you don't usually get it all at one time. Just follow your gut, your guide, your intuition. There's always something that will open up, always another door that will be provided, but just don't ever give up if your heart is in it. And if you have any questions about my journey, ways that I've made money, how I've continued to make money, anything regarding, please comment, message below. I'd be happy to make another video. I just want to say thank you so much for watching up until this point. If you had, I really do appreciate it. It means the world to me that you have sat here and listened to me speak on and on about my life. And I would love to help you too also achieve your dreams, whatever that might be. And if maybe me sharing my story can inspire you to do something different, to follow your own guidance, to follow your own path. Don't even follow your own path. Like, make sure you even tune out the sounds of what you think that you should do and just really follow what you want to do, because eventually it will all work out. So yes, again, thank you so much. If you like this video, please hit that like button. Please hit that subscribe Please hit that subscribe button. Thank you so much, and come back for more content like this.